Hello and welcome to Mr. Miller Reads. Today we're going to be looking at Jackson Pollock, written and illustrated by Mike Venezia. Jackson Pollock was born in Cody, Wyoming in 1912. He was the youngest of 5 brothers and grew up to be one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. Jackson is best known for the huge paintings he made by splattering, throwing, and dripping paint onto his canvases. Jackson used old, hardened brushes, sticks, and anything else he could find that would splatter on paint the way he liked. Jackson's style of art is often called abstract expressionism. Because Jackson moved around a lot and used so much energy while he painted, he preferred to call his style action painting. Jackson Pollock wanted people to feel and see the energy he felt while painting. Even though you can't recognize any objects in Jackson's most famous paintings, they are filled with expression, movement, and rhythm. While Jackson was growing up, his family moved all over the western states, usually from one ranch or farm to another. No matter how much work needed to be done, Mrs. Pollock always preferred to see her sons working on anything having to do with art. It was probably because of her encouragement that 3 of Jackson's older brothers also became artists. When Jackson was 8 years old, his family moved to Janesville, California. Many American Indians lived in the area. Sometimes Jackson and his brothers would sneak up into the mountains to the Indian burial grounds and watch their ceremonial dances. An Indian woman who helped take care of Jackson and his brothers often told them Indian legends and stories. Years later, Jackson put mythological Indian creatures and symbols into some of his paintings. When Jackson Pollock was just beginning high school in California, his oldest brother, Charles, was studying to be an artist in New York City. Charles often sent Jackson art magazines and wrote him letters about what he was learning. Jackson always admired his older brother's talent. When Jackson was 18, his brother Charles returned home for a visit. When it was time for Charles to return to New York, Jackson went with him. He had decided to become a serious artist, too. When Jackson got to New York, he entered the same art school that Charles was going to, and had the same teacher, Thomas Hart Benton. Thomas Hart Benton was already a famous American artist at the time. He was known for his large murals. A mural is a huge painting made to cover a wall or ceiling of a building. Jackson assisted Thomas Benton on some of his murals by posing, mixing paints, and cleaning the studio. Jackson learned how large paintings were made and tried to make his paintings look like Thomas Benton's. But Jackson had a difficult time giving his paintings the feeling and finished look he thought Thomas Benton would like. Jackson Pollock always seemed to have trouble drawing things, too. No matter how hard he tried to make his drawings look the way he wanted, he just couldn't. It was almost like his hand and pencil refused to do what he wanted them to. Jackson often became angry and upset, but teachers kept working with him because they knew how much he wanted to be an artist. The dark, gloomy look Jackson gave himself in the painting above might show how frustrated he felt. One day, Jackson joined the workshop of a famous Mexican mural painter, David Siqueiros, and his friends were experimenting with new types of paint and different ways of painting. They mixed oil colors with paint used for cars. They poured their colorful mixtures onto large canvases and spray painted different surfaces just to see what would happen. Jackson was surprised. He noticed that beautiful and interesting shapes were being created. Jackson thought what he was learning at Siqueiros' workshop might help him create his own artwork without having to draw perfectly. During this time, Jackson learned all he could from the artwork of other modern artists whose paintings were shown at museums and galleries all over New York. Jackson loved the mysterious, frightening, dreamlike scenes Jose Orozco painted in his murals. The strong, powerful shapes and symbols Pablo Picasso used reminded Jackson of American Indian art and brought back memories from his past. Jackson started to combine all the things he had learned with shapes and symbols of his own imagination. Soon, his paintings started to look very different from anything he'd done before. He was finally developing his own way of painting, and people began to notice his brightly colored work. Jackson kept using his imagination and began to create paintings that were really different. Symbols and shapes started to disappear, and his works became larger. He started to drip and splatter paint all over his canvas as a way to show his feelings. In 1945, Jackson bought a farmhouse and married his girlfriend, Lee Krasner. Lee was an artist too. She used one of the bedrooms of their house for a studio, and Jackson used the barn. Jackson usually tacked his canvas to the barn floor. He liked to walk around and be in his painting while he worked. This way, Jackson felt that he was really part of his work. Jackson Pollock died in a car accident in 1956 when he was only 44 years old. Even though he became famous during his lifetime, he was often very unhappy. Important people from all over the world loved to talk and write and argue about his exciting new paintings, but hardly anyone bought his work until years later. Sometimes people have trouble understanding Jackson Pollock's paintings. They feel that anyone could have thrown paint around and done just as good a job, but Jackson knew exactly what he was doing. When you stand in front of a huge Jackson Pollock painting, you can get a feeling of being surrounded by light and color, movement and energy. That is very exciting. It's a good idea to see Jackson Pollock's paintings in person. The special feeling you get of being in an explosion of color and energy has a lot to do with their large size. The metallic and other different types of paint Jackson used help to add that feeling too. This has been a reading of Jackson Pollock, written and illustrated by Mike Venezia. We are actually going to get to make our own Jackson Pollock styled splatter painting utilizing a variety of different paints. I'm really excited to share this with you. Please stay tuned to the next video for all the details. Have a good day.